Hello. I'm here and I'm not super small, I promise. Welcome. Welcome to my stream. If you're new here, that's awesome. And if you've been here before, thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. Like and comment and subscribe and stuff. I was down at the World Oddities Expo in Raleigh and I got attacked by mosquitoes. So I've got a million mosquito bites and it makes me really grumpy because not only are they itchy as heck, but they look gross and I hate them. So I've just been grumpy for 2 days. So today I was like, you know what, we're done being grumpy. We're just going to cover ourselves in anti-itch ointment and do the paranoid ritual washing of all of the sheets in the clothes and things. But I'm still itchy and that doesn't make any sense. That's fun. Speaking of the World Oddities Expo, if you want to see me perform with them, it's going to be in Cleveland next on like June 2nd, I think. So come out to Cleveland, check out that show, or be in Cleveland and check out that show. It'll be live and in person. 6-1 Cleveland, and then Nashville, and then Louisville. Anyway, sometimes I perform with this group called Cirque du Soleil, and they're ridiculous. It's silly clown nonsense, and they're usually theme shows. So on May 24th, if you're in Philly or near Philly and you want to see me perform, so come out to check out Cirque du Soleil. And if you're into the clown aesthetic, then that's going to be the show for you, because that's typically the main space that I do clown face for. Speaking of clown face, I don't know if any of you guys saw my Instagram story or if you follow Coheed and Cambria at all, which you should. But they released their new single, The Joke, and they released another single that I don't know the name of. But The Joke has a music video that went along with it, and it's got, like, you know, sci-fi clown man in it. And if you haven't listened to Coheed and Cambria, then you should. I actually specifically made the Candy Corn Cockroach a Coheed playlist where I was like, hey, if you want to get into them, this is my suggested playlist of how to do that. And if you like it, then listen to them album by album. But I feel like in today's modern day and age, nobody really listens to full albums anymore. And sometimes it's harder to get into a band when you're going through giant concept pieces. And all of their albums are giant, amazing concept pieces. So check them out. If you want to listen to it, I'll start adding that link to the YouTube descriptions so that people can figure out whether or not they like Coheed and Cambria. So, begin at the beginning. Kind of, I guess. Background, some reference for those of you who don't know, for those of you who might be new here. If you're a millennial, you may know about the band Coheed and Cambria. A lot of people first learned about them when they put the song Welcome Home into Guitar Hero, and then everybody learned how to play it because it was very hard and very good and a lot of fun. You might have heard of them before then. Who knows? They're awesome. I feel like whenever I bring up the band Coheed and Cambria, especially to millennials, I get one of two reactions. I either get, oh my god, I love Coheed and Cambria, I've listened to all their stuff, or I get the, yeah, I know about Coheed and Cambria and I like them, but I know about them in the same sort of way that every millennial knows about Coheed and Cambria. They exist and I get excited when I hear their songs because, you know, nostalgia. Even some of the hardcore fans who've listened to all their music, what they don't know is that all of their albums had companion pieces, which were comic books. So each album is a concept album that's based on the storyline of this set of comics. And the set of comics is called the Amory Wars. And it's this sci-fi epic that follows around Coheed and Cambria, the names of the two main characters, and their son, Claudio. I said that I wouldn't internet stalk Claudio Sanchez because I find that cringy, but I did accidentally kind of go down a little rabbit hole last week where I learned more about him than I wanted to, but now I have more information for you guys because I read interviews. And originally the characters Coheed and Cambria were based on him and the woman that he was seeing at the time. But then as the story evolved and things sort of came to be and progressed not only in his life but also in the life of the story, that the characters really started representing his mom and dad, And then when they had a son, he made himself the son, and that is why Coheed and Cambria's child is named Claudio. But now, Claudio Sanchez has a son, and I don't know what that kid's name is, and I'm not going to look it up. And I wonder if now Claudio sees more of himself in Coheed again. Fascinating. Yeah, so honestly, Candy Corn Cockroach, that's the reason that I went down this rabbit hole. I know he wants to have peeps be able to stream their music on Twitch, so I was looking up more references to that because you sent me an article that was like, oh yeah, I think that you should be fine reading it copyright-wise because Claudio thinks that people should be able to stream their music on Twitch because he streams on Twitch. And I knew that he streamed on Twitch and that he really started in the pandemic as an outlet, like a lot of musicians did. They started streaming on Twitch, but he wasn't able to save or record any of his VODs because they all had like copyrighted music in them. And Twitch is a very strict copyright music law guideline. From what I could gather from my weird rabbit hole of Claudio Sanchez interviews is that Claudio would really like Twitch to lighten up or give a broad blanket of okayness for Coheed and Cambria music because Claudio streams, and he thinks that the other nerds who want to stream their music should be able to do that. That makes sense. It really factors in what type of contract Coheed has between themselves and the label, and also how big of bread and butter Coheed makes for the label. And the answer is, I don't know any of that. I do know that for the comic books specifically, that's an independent label that was started by Claudio Sanchez himself and probably somebody else. But that is, the comic books are published under Claudio Sanchez's personal label, which is like Evil Inc. Therefore, I'm less worried about him getting weird about that because it sounds like he's down to have people share his work. I think he's just excited to make work and get people into, you know, what he does. And I love that. Like, share, I feel like that's what my stream is. My stream is just like, share your weird sci-fi self with all the other weird sci-fi people and lean in. Like, we're all nerds here. We love it. Get excited about stuff. I do my best to never yuck somebody's yum. Well, hopefully you won't be lost in the story. Speaking of the story, let's go ahead and give a recap of where we're at so far in the book. Also, I'm going to start this chapter a little bit differently because last chapter ended with a really nice segue. So I'm going to start the next chapter by rereading that segue to sort of get everybody into the realm, or hypothetically into the timeline that we're currently in. Year of the Black Rainbow starts with the prologue, and the prologue kind of outlines the world, which is something that I never personally found in the comics. Maybe they're there. Maybe they're not. I don't know. This universe is called Heaven's Fence. It's 78 planets, and they're aligned in a triangle, and each of the planets are bound together by a beam of blue light, and the beam is called the keywork. And the keywork energy kind of, it supports all of the life on all of the planets. So all of the planets have some form of life, whether it's spooky, scary ghost life, or it's the prize on their weird little angel star, or just humans scattered throughout all of the lives. All of the planets have some form of life on it. Probably some plant planets. I don't know. We haven't heard about those yet. And the keywork supports all of that. And hypothetically, you can use the keywork to travel between the 78 planets of Heaven's Fence. Within Heaven's Fence, you've got 3 types of intelligent beings, I guess. You've got humans, which are like the worker bees. They're just like you and me, except not me, because I'm an alien. They're just kind of there to do the work and to do the things. And there's doctors and researchers, and there's smart ones, and the just general humanity of it. Very relatable. Then you have the mages, and the mages, there's 12 of them, and they're divided up into sectors, and they're there to sort of watch over the humans. They're gray-skinned, and they've got giant shoulder horns, and I think they're all men, and they've got superpowers that are given to them from on high. And you can either be born as a mage, or you can get nominated into becoming a mage, and we don't entirely know how that works. What we do know is that Wilhelm Ryan, the big bad evil guy of the story, he was not born into magedom and was elected into it, I guess. I guess he was elected into it. And they're mostly there just to watch over the humans, to make sure the humans don't do anything real stupid. Mages, humans. And then you have the prize. And the prize are kind of angels. They're very similar to angels. Pale blue skin, long blonde hair, giant angel wings, usually naked. And they work together like the Borg. I don't know if there's a set number of them. There might be. I don't know. And they're there to talk to God and be friends with the heavens and solve God's riddles and all that fun stuff. So the mages watch over the humans, the prize watch over the skies. Anyway, a long time ago, Wilhelm Ryan was elected into the mages, and he met this guy named Covent Marth, and Covent Marth had an officer named Valor Crom. A long, long time ago, Covent Marth was like, Wilhelm Ryan, you're gonna make everything explode. And Wilhelm Ryan was like, no, I won't. And then Covent Marth was like, you will, and I'm watching you, and I'm gonna stop you. But he didn't. Okay, for a while, things were peaceful. And then after that, Wilhelm Ryan was like, I want to have all of the power, because I don't know if I believe in God. So he slowly either killed or kidnapped all of the other mages and started the Mage Wars. And the Mage Wars happened for a long time. And the humans did not like that, because even though they weren't supposed to be affected by the Mage Wars, they totally were. And that was a bummer. During one of the rallies against the Mage Wars, we meet this guy named Dr. Hohenberger and his wife Pearl. Pearl is an etymologist. She's making bugs. She's genetically altering bugs. Different story. And they have a son named Joseph, and Joseph gets shot at a rally and dies. And then Dr. Hohenberger and his wife go into mourning, and it is bad, and they're fighting a lot. So Wilhelm Ryan, who's won the Mage Wars because he's kidnapped all the mages or exploded them, he's like, well, now I have all the power, so I'm going to celebrate. So he does, and he does that by spraying drugs at a parade of people, and they're into it. But then he watches these like drug-filled humans party, and he's like, it's boring. God, you're boring. God, fight me. So he tells God to fight him. And then the next day, a black rainbow shows up and takes over all the skies. So all the skies and all the lands see this black rainbow, and they're like, And the humans are divided. The humans either think that Wilhelm Ryan put up the black rainbow because he's all powerful and all knowing, and it's his way of being like, look at how much power I have. Or they're like, this is bad. We don't know where this came from. So those are the two camps of the humans. The prize noticed the black rainbow, and they're like,
oh, maybe we should have stepped in during those Mage Wars things and stopped them, because this came from God. Oh no.
So the prize are all like,
oh, what do we do?
And the person who's currently in charge of them, her name is Paranoia, which is a ridiculous name. She's like,
I'm in charge right now, so I'm gonna talk to Dr. Hohenberger and give him all of the knowledge.
Except she doesn't really give him the knowledge. She just sort of unlocks the knowledge in his brain. Like he has it already, and then she pokes him, and then he screams, and then he's like, I know what to do. I'm going to make some IRO bots. And so he does. At the same time, Wilhelm Ryan's like, well, I have all the power, and I don't care about this black rainbow, and I don't know where it came from. It's probably God just trying to fight me, so I'm going to try to fight God. And his number one in command, which is named Mayo Deftinwolf, is like,
yeah, sure, buddy, I'm down. Bet.
Wilhelm Ryan's trying to fight God, and in the meantime, he elects 12 people, humans, I guess, to watch over the 12 sectors because he's so tired of babysitting humanity, which seems very silly because he's just reenacted the mages, except he can't give these people powers. I don't know, whatever. I'm sure we're going to learn more about that. That doesn't matter to me. Not right now, because back to Dr. Hohenberger. Paranoia was like,
hey doctor, you're gonna save everything.
And he's like, how? And she's like,
you're gonna make these three things, and that's the ground team, and they're gonna go take over Wilhelm.
And he's like, okay. So he does. He collects 2 scientists to put on his team to work over top secrecy, because that's the other thing is Wilhelm Ryan cannot find out that Dr. Hohenberger is working on these 3 beings. And so Dr. Hohenberger first makes Inferno. Inferno is basically a genetic identical IRO bot to Dr. Hohenberger. So they're kind of like clones, but with accelerated growth. So they come out of their gestational tube as adults, but also all of the information they need is directly pumped into their brains. So they don't necessarily have childhoods, but they do have knowledge and memories once they exit their tube. So Inferno is basically a buff Dr. Hohenberger, and he's the first one to come out of the tubes, and it takes him like 6 months to make him, and he has the wrong voice, but that's fine. And then Inferno, Dr. Hohenberger, and the 2 lab scientists, which have names that I've forgotten, make Coheed and Cambria, who are supposed to be these asexual war monsters that are just here to beat teeth in. And so our last couple of chapters were really about Dr. Hohenberger making Coheed and Cambria, because originally Coheed and Cambria were supposed to be these asexual fighting machines, very effective, very efficient. And we knew that Coheed's DNA came from a male subject, of which Dr. Hohenberger knew, and Cambria has weird DNA that's a mystery. And the only thing that we know about Cambria's DNA is that it's 0.0001 mage. Ooh, how does that happen? Nobody knows. But we also know that it was a present from the prize. But Dr. Hohenberger doesn't know that. He's just like, I got lady DNA. This is the lady DNA for Cambria. Done. So she's just her. And she's got low-level psionic abilities. And Coheed, the man we found out in the last chapter, is actually made out of Dr. Hohenberger's son's DNA. So Joseph, the son who was killed in the rally, is basically Coheed, except Coheed is the adult version and not the 17 whiny going to a rally to get shot version. Which really messes with Pearl's brain, Dr. Hohenberger's wife, and also Dr. Hohenberger does a really strict job of keeping Pearl away from the IRO bots. And the other thing is that the IRO bots don't really know that they're not real. They don't really know that they're created. What they've done with Coheed is they've also taken out one of his arms and they turned it into a cannon, and the other arm has blades that can come out of it. And both of these things can transform back into normal arms, but it triggered through thoughts can be swords and cannons. That's a thing. That's Coheed. That's Cambria. They have a training sequence, and even though they're supposed to be super asexual, Coheed definitely is dropping the vibes on Cambria. And I don't know how Cambria feels about any of this. They haven't really delved into her psyche yet. She's just very smart. That's the only thing they've really told us about her brain. But Coheed is just like, I'm vibing on that. And she's kind of like, I guess. I mean, I don't know. They really don't talk about Cambria's brain desires. I forgot to update you on this part of Wilhelm Ryan. So in the last chapter that we read, Wilhelm Ryan went down to his basement dungeon place and he found Valor Crom, because even though back when Wilhelm Ryan won the Mage Wars and he killed Covent Marth, the guy who was like, you're gonna end everything, and he was like, nah. So Wilhelm Ryan poofed him. Covent Marth is gone, but Covent Marth had a commander named Valor Crom, and Wilhelm Ryan did not kill Valor Crom, instead stuck him in the dungeon. Also, all of the mages that Wilhelm Ryan kidnapped, he put them in incubators. What is he doing to those mages? Nobody knows. I think he's milking them, but that's a different story, and that's what I think the drugs were. I think the drugs was mage milk from that parade. That has not been confirmed nor denied. That's just my idea. Anyway, so Valor Crom is in the dungeon, not in an incubator, and Valor Crom, though he is a human, was gifted, I think he was gifted eternal life by Covent Marth, who was a mage, and I guess mages are able to gift eternal life to people. It's sci-fi. Just go with it. Wilhelm Ryan went down to Valor Crom in the dungeon and was like, yo, I want you. I bet you're wondering why I haven't killed you yet. And Valor Crom was like, not really. I don't care. And Wilhelm Ryan was like, be on my team. Valor Crom was like, nah, not gonna do that. And so then they had this whole hypothetical discussion of what the point was, I guess. And what it sounds like is that Ryan is trying to fight God, but wants God to show himself to Ryan to have that actual fight. And Wilhelm Ryan's like, if God's not going to fight me personally, then everything is I'm just going to prove everything. It's all done. It's fine. We're done. And Valor Crom was not on board with that. So he's like, no, I'm not going to join your team. Sorry. So basically, Coheed and Cambria go out after they've been trained by Dr. Hohenberger to fight, to just figure out what's going on and to try to find Wilhelm Ryan. And they don't, but they find Mayo Deftinwolf, and Mayo Deftinwolf comes back and is like,
yo, these people are like, they did a thing.
And Wilhelm Ryan's like, what people? I know about all the people. And Deftinwolf's like,
I guess you don't.
Except it wasn't like that because Deftinwolf has utmost faith in Wilhelm Ryan, and Wilhelm Ryan thinks that he does know everything because he's a narcissist. But I think that puts everybody up to date in the story. And from there, I think we're ready to begin. Year of the Black Rainbow by Claudio Sanchez with Peter David. I would say chapter 10, but it's the end of chapter 10. Ah, man, I just missed my place in the book. Year of the Black Rainbow by Claudio Sanchez with Peter David. The end of chapter 10. The battle had been taken to Wilhelm Ryan in a way it had never been during the Mage Wars. On one occasion in the months that passed, he would actually confront them face to face and attempt to simply blow knowledge and the beast out of existence, firm in the belief that there was no creature upon heaven's fence of which he was not a master. Such a tactic had worked on other foes, including Marth. It did not work on them. Knowledge, the beast, and Inferno, KBI, as they would be referred to in the whispers throughout the fence, were not beings spawned of anything natural. Crafted from varied components, including DNA supplied by the Celestial Prize, they were beings upon whom Ryan's abilities proved ineffective. Their tactics, on the other hand, proved all too effective against Ryan's interests. Word began to spread that there was a resistance growing against the power base of Wilhelm Ryan. People who are bludgeoned into submission do not willingly stay that way for long. Ryan acquired his supporters, those who were willing to convince themselves that the identity of the person or persons overseeing Heaven's Fence was of no relevance to them. What did it matter who was running things, as long as they had jobs and food and a home to go to and a bed upon which to rest their heads? But there were others who had a much broader view of the worlds upon which they lived, others who saw Wilhelm Ryan as a dark cancer that would slowly grow to consume the entirety of Heaven's Fence. And these individuals challenged the authority of Ryan, and more particularly, his men and any who were allied with House Atlantic. They staged protests against Ryan. They targeted Ryan's soldiers, sent into incendiary situations in cooperation with the government who felt that their own peace officers were overmatched by the ferocity and anger of the crowds. And wherever Ryan's army was out in force, there did Coheed and Cambria show up as well. It seemed almost supernatural, the way they managed to be right where they needed to be, ready and willing and more than able to unleash punishment upon Ryan's armed forces. They did so with an unrestrained joy in the orgy of battle and boundless confidence that they would triumph, which they inevitably did. Inferno, the less visible but no less important member of their endeavors, constantly monitored their actions and served as their eye in the sky. As time passed, he could not help but notice the bond that seemed to be growing between Coheed and Cambria. Neither of them seemed to be aware of it, or perhaps they were simply unwilling to admit it, since they both could be staggeringly stubborn at times. This was something of a relief to Inferno, since he was convinced that a strong emotional ties between them could prove destructive to their missions in the long term, and should be discouraged, or, at the very least, not encouraged. There were some who believed that these mysterious individuals, of whom the government had no trace and seemed to be quite certain as a consequence that they could possibly not exist, were behind the protests, that they were orchestrating matters in order to lure Ryan's men so that they could then come sweeping in and smash through them, leaving devastation as their calling card. There were others who were convinced that they were the right hand of God, who had put forth the Black Rainbow as a sign to let the people know that these powerful beings were going to be coming to rescue them from whatever schemes Ryan had hatching. Those fervent beliefs helped to stoke the flames of rebellion. There were cries to shake off Wilhelm Ryan as a dog shakes off fleas. That Ryan had deep and fearful schemes that the Lord on high was trying to warn humanity about. And if Ryan was not taken down by humanity, then God might have to do it himself. And there was every possibility that God might feel the need to annihilate the entirety of humanity while he was at it. None of this bothered Ryan. Knowing that time was on his side, his people investigated every possible aspect of knowledge and beast. They used spies and soldiers and bribery and incentives and double blinds and scapegoats and decoys, and eventually Ryan found them. It went downhill from there. So that was the end of chapter 10. See, that was a useful aside into chapter 11. I feel like hopefully we're now caught up with the timeline, because if I've struggled with anything in this book so far, it's the timeline. But I think we're there. Year of the Black Rainbow by Claudio Sanchez with Peter David. Chapter 11. The World of Lines. Hohenberger could scarcely believe how smoothly everything was going. The KBI was accomplishing everything that he needed them to do. At the moment, they were on the world Null Calcutta, launching a full-scale attack against one of the training camps where Deftinwolf was training new recruits to Ryan's army. He stood in front of the rock at Joseph's inspiration hideout, smiled wanly at it. In his mind's eye, he could see Coheed and Cambria mowing through Ryan's soldiers, scattering them left and right, blasting apart anything stupid enough to get in their way. He hoped that bastard Deftinwolf was there to see again how powerless his recruits were in the face of Coheed and Cambria's invincible might. And hovering high above it all, providing additional ground cover should it be necessary, was Inferno's mighty space vessel, ready to rain down firepower on their enemies in the unlikely event that Coheed and Cambria found themselves in over their heads. That had not happened yet, though. Knowledge and Beast had proven themselves too formidable. "It's a simple endgame, Joseph," Hohenberger said to his son's grave. "Isolate Ryan, destroy the people who are foolish enough to follow him, make those who remain alive so terrified of the KBI that they turn against Ryan to save their own lives, and maybe make it impossible for Ryan to find himself fresh meat for his troops, because who's going to want to join up with Ryan if they know they may never make it out of training? Oh, I know what you're thinking," he said with a sigh. "The recruits are just kids who don't know any better. Kids who were dragged into the clutches of Ryan's army with promises of vast fortunes or rewards in this life or the next. They don't deserve to die for that. And you're right, they don't. I promise you, Coheed and Cambria are going to go easy on them. Shoot to wound rather than kill. Blow up as much armament as possible. If anyone is running from them, they won't hunt them down to kill them. I mean, their own safety comes first, of course. But they'll minimize the loss of human life. And there are several other training camps as well on other worlds in the Keywork. They'll be heading to those as well. And then," he paused for dramatic effect, "then they go after the 8 surviving mages. It won't be easy. There's just rumors about them so far. Supposedly, Ryan is trying to figure out a way to incorporate the mages into his bag of tricks somehow by experimenting on them. I can't even imagine what he's trying to use them for or what they're going through, but Coheed and Cambria will find a way and free them from Ryan's control, even if they have to search every planet in the fence to do it. The Coheed and Cambria Worlds Tour. Ryan won't know what hit him. Everywhere he turns, everywhere he looks, that's what KBI is going to be." "Joseph, He hesitated, and when he spoke again, there was a choking in his voice. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come around to your point of view. You tried to get me to understand the importance of getting involved, and I just stuck my head in the sand and tried to say it wasn't my problem. It shouldn't have required your death to get me off my ass and into the fight. And all I can do now is try to make up for my stupidity. I know it won't bring you back, but perhaps it will help your mother with her pain and give you a little peace. Besides," he picked up several small rocks, palmed them a moment, and then laid them down atop a large boulder. He wasn't sure why he was doing it. It just seemed the thing to do. Then he turned and walked away from the spot without the slightest inkling that he would only return there one more time in his life. And when he did, there would be blood everywhere. Da, da, da. So far, the asterisks have either meant we're in the same chapter and we're going from Hohenberger to talking about Wilhelm Ryan, or we're just changing everything entirely, or we're doing a time shift. So I don't know what's gonna happen. Okay. Now there's a flash forward to It's fine. I'm not emotionally attached to this doctor at all. Hohenberger was moving with new confidence and additional spring to his step these days. He hoped that some of the positive feeling might possibly rub off on Pearl. She had allowed herself to show only the slightest of interest in the activities of KBI, but Hohenberger was sure that she was eager to know how they were progressing in their activities. He could understand her being low-key about it. Like Leonard, Pearl was probably afraid to embrace the notion of hope or the belief that Heaven's Fence might someday be rid of the blight known as Wilhelm Ryan. He had not seen her all day. He assumed that she had gone into the greenhouse to study her precious insects first thing in the morning, and he had opted not to disturb her while she was there. Now, though, with much of the day gone, it seemed a reasonable plan to find his wife and suggest that perhaps they dine together, or watch the vid together, or, well, do anything together, really. Perhaps Pearl had been right and they couldn't be a family anymore, but at least maybe they could try to be a couple once again. He entered his house and called out, Pearl, honey? No answer. He went to the greenhouse and rapped the door. Pearl, he said again. Still, no reply. He didn't want to have to put on all the protective gear, so he risked sticking his unshielded head into the greenhouse and called her name a third time. Yet again, there was no response, and now the silence was beginning to take on a life of its own. It hung upon him ominously, as if a shroud had been draped over him and his house. Carefully, he closed the door, his mind racing, and as he turned, he was caught completely off guard. A massive form that he recognized instantly was standing directly behind him. Hohenberger let out a cry of alarm and stumbled back, the blood in his head pounding with such an intensity that he felt as if his eyes were about to blow out of their sockets. Mayo Deftinwolf was standing there, with his arms casually draped behind his back. He was wearing a heavy red overcoat that fell from his squared shoulders down to just below his ankles. His chest glittered with several large medals that he had no doubt earned in his service of Wilhelm Ryan. Or perhaps he had taken them off the bodies of fallen enemies? You, Deftinwolf said calmly, should never play cards, Doctor. You are not particularly skilled at hiding your reactions. You are acting as if you know why I am here, which would make it rather problematic if you were intending to deny it. I don't know what you're talking about, Hohenberger managed to say, but just barely. That is... Deftinwolf calmly waved off any further attempts at protest. Please, Doctor, don't embarrass yourself. We both know what you have been up to. He waggled a scolding finger as if he were expressing impatience with a misbehaving child. You have been up to some things that have tremendously inconvenienced both Wilhelm Ryan and myself, and I cannot for the life of me guess who is more irked. I think you need to sit down now. Hohenberger tried to point toward the nearest door, to command Deftinwolf to leave immediately, or he would call. Who are you going to summon? Deftinwolf asked, as if reading the doctor's mind. Who do you seriously believe is going to try to escort me out? Why, if you endeavor to call for help, I can as much guarantee as you that they will haul you out of this house before they do me. Or do you think that your more, how shall we put it, heavily armed associates are going to come riding to your rescue? You know as well as I that they are off gallivanting around Heaven's Fence, attacking various sites, the whereabouts of which I have taken great pains to make certain are public knowledge. I don't know what you... Deftinwolf was upon him, moving so quickly across the room that one moment he seemed to be on the opposite side, and then he was right there, grabbing Hohenberger by the front of his shirt and lifting him clear off the floor. Hohenberger gasped and his throat closed up in fear, preventing him from saying anything further. Considering Deftinwolf's next words, that was a fortune for Hohenberger. If you offer up one more stammering, unconvincing word of protest, I will do damage to you. Deftinwolf said so softly that Hohenberger had to strain to hear him. It will not be permanent damage. It will not impede your ability to function in any way. You will recover, but it will hurt like hell, and there will be no escaping that pain for the duration of it. Do you understand what I am saying? Blink once for yes. There is no acceptable response to represent no. Hohenberger closed his eyes and then held them shut to indicate yes, as fervently as he could. Good, said Deftinwolf. Slowly, he set Hohenberger on his feet. Then he carefully smoothed out the front of Hohenberger's shirt, as if he were a professional groomer. We are both intelligent men, Doctor. Our business shouldn't entail threats or hostilities or being manhandled, should it? We have business? Hohenberger was choosing his words carefully and trying his hardest to keep his voice from shaking. Of course we do. If we did not, why, I would simply kill you, and that would be that. Yes, we have business. Very important business, I might add. He gestured for Hohenberger to walk ahead of him to the living room. Hohenberger did so, his legs like leaden slabs, tensing the entire time, waiting for a knife to his heart or a gun to be pressed against his head. At the same time, he realized that there was no reason to be in dread of such things. Deftinwolf was right. If his desire was simply to dispose of Hohenberger, then the doctor would be dead by now. There was something else on Deftinwolf's mind. The notion was even more ominous than the prospect of death. It was at that point that Hohenberger suddenly reached an obvious conclusion that was, indeed a knife to his heart. He stopped in the entranceway to the living room and said, "Where's my wife?" "That's a very good question, Doctor. If you wouldn't mind sitting down." "I'm not going to sit down. Where's Pearl? What have you done with—" He got no further. Deftinwolf's hand made the slightest of downward gestures, and a long, black rod snapped out. Obviously something. This is hard. Okay. I don't like reading the violent parts. I'm bad at it. Deftinwolf's hand made the slightest of downward gestures, and a long, black rod snapped out. Obviously something that he'd had in his palm. He whipped the rod around, and it took Hohenberger in the back of his right knee. Hohenberger's leg bent forward as the doctor cried out in pain, whereupon Deftinwolf slammed forward with the base of his palm and struck Hohenberger in the chest. Hohenberger tumbled back and hit the couch with such a force that the couch started to tilt as well, threatening to flip over. Deftinwolf brought his foot down hard into the armrest, slamming it back down. It jolted Hohenberger and nearly catapulted him from the couch. We were in action mode, and I read that in not action mode. But it's fine. It's just not, it's fine. We're fine. We're fighting on the couch. Deftinwolf's voice dropped again, this time so softly that Hohenberger felt as if just the act of breathing might drown it out. "You will do what I say, and when I say it, or I will simply stuff you in a box and let Wilhelm Ryan explain what he wants of you. And if it should come to that, I can assure you that he will be far less gentle than I. Is that understood?" Hohenberger nodded. "I didn't hear you." "Yes, that's understood." "Very good. Now," he held up a small vid chip. "There is something you need to see." He inserted the chip into the player and stepped back, like a magician about to show off a particularly dazzling trick. The terrifying thing was that Hohenberger had an idea of what he was going to see before it appeared on the screen. Even so, the sight of it was still like a hammer blow to his chest. Suddenly, he couldn't breathe again. But there was no physical cause this time. This time, everything required to rip his soul from his body was playing out on the video screen. It was Pearl. God only knew. What? Oh no, it's gonna get sad. I'm gonna struggle again. Okay. God only knew when she had been taken. He suddenly realized that not only had he not seen her this morning, but in fact, he had not seen her since last night. They had been so distant lately that her not coming to bed with him wasn't all that bizarre. Many nights she flopped down either in the living room couch or, even more achingly, the bed in Joseph's room. Maybe one night in 5 did she crawl into bed with her husband, and then she would go straight to sleep more often than not. She had been placed into something that could only be described as a glass coffin. It was perfectly rectangular and seamless, just wide enough to enclose her without providing her any additional space to move around. It was so horrifyingly narrow that she wasn't even able to move her arms. They were pinned at her sides. The only aperture in the whole thing was a narrow window right in front of her face, through which, presumably, food or drink could be introduced so that she could survive, although who knew for how long. But the window could be slid open or closed, and at the moment it was closed. Her face was a rictus of terror, her mouth open and screaming, but no voice was emerging. Leonard couldn't determine whether it was because the video had been shot without sound or if she simply couldn't be heard while she was within. Her thin nightgown had been soaked through with sweat, and beaded perspiration clung to her skin. The coffin was suspended by 8 chains, each spidering out in a different direction and composed of a crystalline blue substance that Leonard had never seen before. The coffin hung from an unseen point in the video. Then, the camera that was recording the entire thing angled downward, and Hohenberger saw that there was a yawning pit beneath it, low lit with the yellow-blue haze of a headlight on a foggy night. He could not see the bottom of it, and there was nothing but inky blackness below. "Your wife appears to be in quite a fix," said Deftinwolf. He said it with an air of resigned frustration, as if he was witnessing something that was remarkably tragic, but he couldn't do a damned thing about it. He was but a helpless witness to a disaster in the making, like someone standing on a sidewalk and seeing 2 vehicles barreling toward each other at breakneck speed, unable to intervene in time. "The poor thing must be suffering terribly. If only she were being held at some place accessible. like, say, House Atlantic. Tragically, however, she's not. She's nowhere that you're going to be able to find her. You are, of course, free to disbelieve me. Why, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if, in some display of bravado, certain individuals mounted an assault on House Atlantic in the vain hope that they could rescue poor, terrified Pearl. Not only would that prove to be a hopeless endeavor, what with her not being there, but it would also result in Pearl's predicament coming to an untimely end in retaliation. The funniest part about this is just old, like, supervillain with the mustache and the damsel tied up on the train tracks. Mare, come rescue her in time, or else the train is going to explode and squish her to bits. You got it. Hohenberger managed to say something, but his voice was so strangled that it was barely above a whisper. Deftinwolf leaned forward and cocked an ear. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. With great effort, Hohenberger repeated just loudly enough to be heard this time. What do you want? Ah, now we come to it. Except it's not what I want, of course. It's about what Wilhelm Ryan wants. It's always about what Wilhelm Ryan wants. You have to understand that this is his world. You are simply living in it. The vast influence of the Hohenberger was suddenly on his feet, and although he made no move on Deftinwolf, his fists were trembling, and this time, when he spoke, it was with such fury that Deftinwolf was certain that, had Hohenberger been armed, he would have tried to fire on him. Tell me what you want, you arrogant bastard! Deftinwolf could have put his fist through Hohenberger's face at that moment. Instead, he actually nodded slightly in approval. So now the mask comes off. Very good. We are men of conviction, you and I. Masks do not become us. He paused, and then said, You have mightily inconvenienced Wilhelm Ryan, but he is prepared to be generous. Is he? His voice was flat and humorless. How magnanimous of him. It is rather. He is aware of the death of your son, and also of your manipulation at the hands of the prize. He believes that you are not in your right mind, that your personal tragedy coupled with the interference of the prize has unhinged you. On that basis, it seems unjust to punish you for the indisputable crimes that you have committed against his person. Still, there must be some sort of atonement on your part. Atonement? He shook his head. Are you telling me Wilhelm Ryan wants me to apologize to him? Beg his pardon? Words mean nothing. Actions are all that matters. He requires that you take action in order to settle accounts. What sort of action? Well, now we come to it. You will have to deliver your creations to him. That goes without saying. This beast in knowledge, their career has been exciting, certainly, but it has to come to an end. That, however, to put it in banking terms, is merely repaying the principal. Wilhelm Ryan will require an interest payment as well. He reached into his pocket and produced a small envelope and proffered it to Hohenberger. The doctor looked at it suspiciously and didn't reach for it. The edges of Deftinwolf's mouth twitched. I could stand here extending this to you all day, you know. This meeting was all I had scheduled, but I'm not entirely sure how much time your beloved Pearl has. You, doctor, are really the only one who is under deadline pressure. So, Hohenberger grabbed the envelope from Deftinwolf's hands. His impulse was to rip it open, but not knowing the contents, instead he opened it carefully, as to not damage whatever was inside. He discovered a data chip within, and held it up curiously. I assume you have the proper equipment to read the information contained upon it, said Deftinwolf. Hohenberger nodded. Presuming it isn't encoded in some way that would prevent it, but I don't understand. Have a look. Take all the time you want. Time that Pearl doesn't have. That was the unspoken part of the sentence. Quickly, Hohenberger took the chip and inserted it into his computer. An array of files immediately appeared on the screen. He began to study them, trying to comprehend what it was that he was looking at. Within seconds he understood, and the realization chilled him. This is a virus, he said. And a manufactured virus of some sort, or at least an attempt to create one. The preliminary samples, the tests. He looked in shock at Deftinwolf. You actually tested this. this thing on victims. Wilhelm Ryan prefers the term subjects, but victims is accurate enough, I suppose, said Deftinwolf. However, I object to characterizing it as a thing. When referring to it, I would request that you use the name given it by Wilhelm Ryan. The Monstar? Hohenberger had found the name in the file. The Monstar virus? Correct. But what would be the purpose of it? You're an intelligent man. You had the data in front of you. You tell me. Hohenberger went back to studying the equations and records in front of him. Slowly, he started to shake his head. My God, the virulence of the monster would be... General, do you know what this is? This is a partially completed formula for doomsday. How can you be part of it? I mean, I understand your devotion to Ryan, okay. Actually, I don't understand it. But at least I'm aware of it. But certainly, there are larger, more fundamental matters to be considered than loyalty to one man. I'm sure there is. But Wilhelm Ryan is far, far more than one man. You would not question those who devote their lives to serving God, would you? But he is not God. Well, there we come to it. What makes him not God? Obviously, it's the ability that God has to smite all life with little to no effort. Make no mistake, Wilhelm Ryan can destroy all life on the fence, but it would take a remarkably long time. The Monstar, however, would be able to do so in no time at all by being introduced directly into the keywork. But the keywork isn't alive. A virus can only affect living things, and the keywork is energy, not living. Are you sure? 3 words. That was all that he said. 3 simple words. Yet, Hohenberger realized that the answer to those 3 words might as well hold the entire future of Heaven's Fence within it. And it was an answer that he did not possess. Deftinwolf pointed at the screen. As you see, the Monstar, when properly introduced to the keywork, will consume the energies therein. And since the keywork provides light and energy to the populace of Heaven's Fence, the virus will then permeate every molecule of every living thing. Even as the keywork dissolves, everyone on all 78 planets will die in a flurry of chaos. It will almost be a race to see which happens first. Every man, woman, and child dropping dead, or the keywork itself losing its cohesion and causing the worlds to drift apart. That's one of the unknowns of the entire equation, you see. One of the things that Wilhelm Ryan wants you to work on. Not that it really matters all that much in the grand scheme of things. He's just curious to know. The grand scheme of things? Hohenberger echoed incredulously. In the grand scheme, everyone dies and everything ends. Why does the order of it matter in the least? Because Wilhelm Ryan says it matters, said the general. And that is sufficient for me. However, that is really the more secondary concern. Of primary concern is that it doesn't quite work yet. As you can see from the reports and studies, although it is certainly a formidable threat, it still lacks the devastating virulence, the sheer killing power that Wilhelm Ryan requires. That, my good doctor, is where you come in. Well, where you and your wife come in. You, he clapped his hand on Hohenberger's shoulder, as if he were a friend congratulating him on a great honor, have been chosen by no less than Wilhelm Ryan himself to make the Monstar a reality, to aid it in reaching its full potency and potential. You want me to fill in the gaps of Ryan's research so that he can successfully complete a virus that can eliminate all life and destroy the fabric of the keywork itself? I would have it put a bit less melodramatically, but yeah, that is essentially it. And you will notice that there is a communications program built into the file. When you have solved the problem, you will simply activate it, and it will automatically send the message directly to Wilhelm Ryan. He will then dispatch someone, me, no doubt, to retrieve the results of your efforts. Hohenberger began to tremble with a mixture of fear and outrage. It's out of the question. It's impossible. When he uses that virus, I will be directly responsible for the death of billions. When? Deftinwolf made a scolding noise, a faint clucking with his lips. Tisk, tisk, doctor. Who says anything about when? This is merely an if. An absolute worst-case scenario that Wilhelm Ryan will use only as a last resort. Believe me, if you only knew the circumstances under which he would employ the Monstar, well, you would understand that by that point the quality of life on Heaven's Fence would have reached such abysmal levels that the death would be nothing less than a mercy bestowed by him upon a desperate population. At the point where the Monstar were used, the people would welcome death. And what circumstances would I'm just as flustered as Dr. Hohenberger. And what circumstances would those be? Ah, he waggled a finger. I'm not going to tell you that. It's something that you shouldn't be worrying yourself about. You need to be worrying about the Monstar. But I can't. Billions of lives that might be lost. It is by no means a certainty, which is again why you should not be concerning yourself about it. Instead, what you need to be focusing on is the one life that will most definitely be lost, that of your beloved wife. Those chains you see, and he pointed at them, are not the sturdiest, I'm afraid. It's so difficult to find quality workmanship these days. Unfortunately, there's a chance that they might snap. The entire coffin could tumble into, well, you don't really know, do you? It could be a pit that simply has a bottom, against it will crash, or perhaps there are spikes protruding from that, so your wife will know the sensation of being impaled, or perhaps, all right, Hohenberger shouted. And Deftinwolf could easily have reached over and choked the life out of him for daring to raise his voice, but instead he restrained himself and simply watched Hohenberger writhing in the grip of a dilemma that threatened to rip him apart. He put his hand to his head. All right, he said much more quietly. I understand the situation. I need to think. Absolutely. Take all the time you need. He waited 3 seconds. There. That's enough time. So what is your decision? I don't know. You don't know what? Whether you want to see your wife alive ever again? Doctor, let me make something abundantly clear to you. Your cooperation buys your wife time. Time in which she will likely be driven out of her mind with fear, but at least she will still have a mind to be driven out of, as opposed to a mass of gray matter that's spread all over the floor. However, if you refuse to cooperate, then she is out of time immediately. Except, don't think that the chains will simply be cut and she will be allowed to plummet to her death. Instead, she will be removed from the coffin, and things will be done to her. Terrible things. Unspeakable things. He dropped his voice so there was almost a purr. Things that will make her long for death, with such intensity that when the poor, pathetic remains of the woman that was once recognizable as Pearl Hohenberger are finally hurled to its deserved death, her final words will be curses hurled at you because you allowed it to happen. You, doctor, and no one else. Is that what you want? What she wants? Is that? And he paused dramatically. What Joseph would have wanted? Never had Hohenberger more desperately wanted to kill a human being than at that moment, when he wanted to come at Deftinwolf and rip his entrails out and strangle him with them. Never had he felt more helpless, because he knew that not only could he not possibly battle someone as formidable as Deftinwolf, but even if he somehow miraculously managed to kill Deftinwolf, then he would be condemning Pearl to death. Yes. He barely recognized his own voice as he said the words. Yes, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you say. Make you whatever you want. Good. And while you are working on perfecting the Monstar, Wilhelm Ryan will be taking good care of her. Good, personal care. Don't hurt her. Please, his voice choked. I'm begging you. She's never done anything wrong in her life. She doesn't deserve this. Of course she does. How can you say that? Deftinwolf smiled. She was foolish enough to trust you. And with that, Deftinwolf walked out of Leonard's house, as silent in departing as he had been in his arrival. Within moments, the only sound that remained was the soft sobbing of Leonard Hohenberger. That changed, though, when he discovered that Deftinwolf had simply turned off the sound on his vid screen. When the sound came on, the air was also filled with the terror-filled screams of Pearl Hohenberger, which continued because it refused to shut off, despite Hohenberger's best efforts. The only thing that finally ended it was the resounding crash and shattering of glass after Hohenberger grabbed the paperweight and hurled it with full force through the vid screen, destroying the entire mechanism. None of which mattered, because the screens continued in Hohenberger's head long after the last sputters of electricity stopped flickering in that shattered remains of the vid. It was a lot, guys. Okay. I don't think that there's meds for Mayo Deftinwolf. I think he's just horrible. Yeah, a basket of fluffy kittens and he will chill out. Hope so. He does need a hug. So that's the end of chapter 11, guys. I think that's Deftinwolf's voice now. It has changed literally every chapter that he shows up, and I'm sorry. But I made that one and I stuck with it. Maybe he doesn't have MPD. I don't know what MPD is. Main deposit personality. Thank you. It was a good voice. I think if I can remember that voice, that we can keep that as Mayo Deftinwolf's multiple personality disorder. That makes sense. Yeah, the way that I've portrayed Deftinwolf so far is very sporadic. The only thing that seems to drive him is hatred and Wilhelm Ryan. That is all of Deftinwolf's things. Yeah. Rose Simeon was recently watching Stop Making Sense. These are, everything is connected. This is the holistic channel. Everything is connected. That was a thing. Like very recently, like within the past week and a half. I don't know how time works. No, the universe is telling me that I need to watch Stop Making Sense because literally last week, Pro Simeon texted me about watching Stop Making Sense, and then today you sent me a picture of Stop Making Sense in 4K, and I'm like, David Byrne is a wonderfully weird dude, and I would like to be his friend. So David Byrne, I'm officially putting it on the internet. Be my friend. Who knew that all along David Byrne was all we needed to stop the Black Rainbow? Only kind of. If he wrote a novel, I'd be reading that on Twitch. I'm pretty sure Talking Heads broke up before I was hatched. I do not know. It's kind of remarkable that Brynna and Byrne are so familiar that people have actually called me Byrne before because they assume that my name is a typo because there's not enough vowels in it. Yeah. My favorite thing to tell people is that my name is Bryn and the Y is silent, and they don't like that. Yeah, I've never seen David Byrne live. I would love to. Speaking of things that are happening live, this summer, Coheed and Cambria are going on tour. They just added a bunch of dates. They're mostly touring with Primus, but also they're touring with Puddle's Pity Party. And then the show that they're doing in Philly is actually with Incubus, and that's in late August. Check out their website for tour dates. I'll put some of them on the screen and in the description and stuff. I would love to see Coheed and Cambria this summer. I haven't invested in tickets yet, and I'll probably actually try to check out the Richmond, Virginia show or the Washington, D.C. show. Those are the show dates with Puddle's Pity Party that I also want to see. And also because those are at smaller venues that look more fun than the Wells Fargo Center. We have fun here. If you want to watch again next week, we start at 8:13. We read some chapters. Yeah. So tune in, do the things, subscribe if you want to, leave comments, all that other fun stuff. And I will see you in the future. I'm glad even the little bits was fun. Okay, I love you. Good night. Say, hey, we're gonna wrap up this chapter, so bye.